Check. 1, 2, 3, 4. Checking. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Turn the captions on in Zoom or turn the captions on?
Is that coming out? One, 2, 3, 4. Checking. 1, 2, 3, 4. 30 seconds.
All right, this budget work session of the Board of Education for May 9th, 2024 is called to order. This meeting is being streamed live on PPS TV Services website and on channel 28 and will be replayed throughout the next 2 weeks. Please check the district website for replay times. Tonight is our final work session to discuss the proposed budget for 2024-25 school year. Either speak up now or you forever hold your peace. The purpose for tonight is to ask any final questions, discuss this budget before we're headed to approval on May 20th. We've had the opportunity to hear from the proposed budget from interim superintendent twice at least, and we've heard it individually more than that, so this is it. And we have also received responses to questions we've submitted to staff. And we'd like to start with going around and sharing any reflections or asking any additional questions of staff at this time. All right. So we will start with Director Wong.
Well, I'm not ready yet.
Okay, I like this already. You want to start with Director Brim? You're not ready yet either?
You could be, but you could go ahead.
Okay, so I only had a couple questions on the budget. You guys answered a lot of the other questions that I've had. I was looking in the budget and I sent the questions out as far as the COLAs and steps and things. And I was thinking I'd talk with Director Wong and Director Scott. I haven't talked to Director Brim Edwards yet. I talked to Director DePaz. Now, and I know this might be a far-fetched idea, but I was wondering if we can get everyone in the district. I know we have to do renegotiations, and I don't know how logistical that could be, to be able to at least do half of their COLA. From the information that I've received, we can save almost $15 million, which we can free up $15 million, which could go to reducing the amount of deductions that we have to have for our student-facing positions. I know that's a tall order. I just got through the budget books to kind of look at that and from the questions I asked. But I was hoping that we have some union reps here today just to kind of throw that out. That just kind of my thought process based on the information that I have received thus far. So I don't know if that's a question or more of an idea. But I was trying to just put it out there to really look at how do we really focus on our students, and with everybody having to pitch in, with everybody having to, you know, if everybody kind of pitched in a little bit, we could actually do something for a lot of our kids. So that was my thought process. All right.
So I've been with the district for over 2 decades and through some pretty tough times. And generally, once we have a negotiated contract, because there's give and take, and so we gave something, they gave something, and the result for these represented employees is they feel like they may have already given something for that COLA, and I think it's I don't think there's any chance that we're going to reopen the contracts. You could ask, but I
Okay,
think
that's all I said, just ask.
I think there's very little, because the
Right.
COLA is one component of a much bigger contract for each of them. And, you know, if their COLAs are different, there probably would be offsets or other things that they'd want to reopen the contract.
Yeah, and I thought about that too. You know, they might want to ask for extra stuff, and I get it. This was just a, you know, idea, really focusing on our students, right? When we were talking about, you know, 15 or almost $15 million in cuts for our student-facing position, and my optimism that, you know, we all work together, we could do something for, give a little bit for our kids. So that was just kind of my thought idea. But that's where I was at.
I was curious, when you went through the contracts, you didn't see anything that you, just in, for all our representative employees, that we have contractual obligations.
Mhm.
And I'm just wondering if there was something else that you saw that, in another category that's not a contractual obligation.
Well, I did. I looked at our unrepresented staff, but it doesn't make sense to put that weight on a small group, right? And that just wouldn't be fair, especially when we're talking about overall budget piece. And it'd be hard to ask unrepresented staff to try to take on the brunt of the whole district, or at least any part of that. So that's why I didn't just say unrepresented staff. That's why I was like, if it was all of us pitching in to do something to be able to help our kids keep those positions.
And for what it's worth, the reason I asked the question about the COLA for non-represented is I ask it every year.
Yeah.
Because it's the one employee group that we're not voting on their specific contract. But it wasn't for other purposes. It was
Yeah.
just
No, I thought about
understand
it. I did. I was like, oh, this is cool. This could free up like $5 million. But then I thought about like, they shouldn't share the brunt of, they shouldn't try to shoulder the brunt of something that I feel that we all could do for our kids. So that's my only thing.
I just want to say I thought that it was a great concept to bring forward. Seeing that if we do this, we might be able to save jobs. And the reality is, if we don't do something, people are going home, and possibly a lot of people. So we wouldn't be the first organization that that's done something like this. There are many other examples where this has been done. And that's within recent years. There's other organizations that we can look at, other schools. A lot of those are higher education, because I looked at it. And so there are several other higher education facilities that have done the same thing in order to cut costs, to keep jobs and keep people there and focus on the students. So I thought it was something good to bring forward. I want to be optimistic that, folks will look at it and they'll be like, oh man, we could do this. But then there's always that other reality that sits on the other side, where they'll be like, and I don't care nothing about them. I'm keeping my job. I want all of my money. And, they'll have to figure something else out. So.
Should, I don't want to assume, but, a little bit of historical context as well. So in talking with Director Hollins, we had a little conversation about this, and I'll just kind of summarize my thoughts. It's like, it doesn't hurt to ask. The messaging really has to be like, we're all in it, we're all going to do it together, because otherwise it's targeted, and that would be unfair. We also have to be very careful how we frame it, in terms of like, this is just a yes or no on, is it possible? Because the moment we ask beyond that, then there comes a risk of it being political. And the moment the politics enter it, people are going to, even refuse to step in the door, because they know that there's a potential they can target. So like, the question should just be like, is this a possibility based on whatever our contract says, or even the workload? And I know on the district side, an ask like this is going to be monumental in terms of all the obstacles that need to be overcome in order to even make this work. A little bit historical, one thing I forgot to share with you was, I forgot what year it was. I think it was like 2010, when there was a bargaining agreement with the PAT, and there were, one of this, because it was a big budget cut year, there was a sacrifice that was made. I think like teachers were asked to work. I don't know, the way it was conveyed to us was like we had to work like 10 days for free or something. I don't remember exactly the details. And even now, there's still a little bit of animosity from that. Like, I remember there are some teachers that shared with me, and even today, like, we were asked to sacrifice so much, we had to work even 10 days for free and stuff like that. So historically, there's even more of a hurdles to kind of.
Actually, I was on the board then. That was 2003.
2003.
And that was the year they were gonna cut 5 weeks from the school year. And the custodians were contracted out. It was like $200,000 in the reserves, and classified nutrition services, DCU, they all took very significant caps on their healthcare benefits. And the teachers didn't actually, the way it was structured, they took actually a pay reduction. But what it got translated, worked 10 days for free, and it was actually a 1-year pay reduction. And then the voters passed the local income tax surcharge, which bought back the five weeks. But
That's right.
the alternative was 5 weeks of no pay, which is that's what would have happened for all employee groups. So everybody gave something, and PAT did say, well, all the other employee groups had very significant caps put on their health benefits. PAT had a much higher one, so they all gave something, and again, custodians, yeah, one month. Pretty
right.
significant reduction in salary.
Thank goodness for your memory. You're like a natural historian.
It was hard to forget.
All right, so,
I have some.
Yep.
And this is more for just making sure I understand exactly what you're going for. And also just some follow-up requests, which I sent to the superintendent. So I'm just looking at the central office reductions, FTE reductions, and then the school reductions. There's 2 charts that we were given, and the central office, it's a total of 113 FTE, and 68 of those positions are filled and 46 are vacant. And my question about the 46 is, do those just go off the rolls?
Do they go off the rolls, meaning,
Out of the budget? Do you mean, are they?
Well,
out
and so
of
they
budget
don't
moving forward?
get repopulated into,
those
are
are
we
not,
establishing a new baseline? It's what I would ask.
yes, correct. So they are funded in this school year, this fiscal year. They are not funded in next fiscal year. So they come off the rolls.
So, okay, so the baseline for the following year would be essentially 113 positions less from the central office. And then the 96 that are coming from schools, those are all, I'm assuming, filled positions.
I would imagine, I don't know position by position, but we never place a hiring freeze on schools. So there's always turnover, right? So, I mean, basically, I would assume that it's a safe assumption that those are primarily filled positions.
Right, but like, say, they're more likely to be like somebody left in the middle of the year.
Right.
Why they're empty,
Right.
not because they started the year. There's very few schools that don't use the FTE. that they-
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And then I had asked, and again, this isn't determinative, I just want the information, is the regular budget detail for the superintendent's office and the board office. And you said you're gonna get that. And I-
Do we have that tonight?
It's not what they're looking for, so it's not.
No. It's not ready yet,
It's not
but I'm
ready.
here.
No, I'm looking at it, it's not ready.
Okay, we'll get it.
It's not.
Yeah, again, I don't need it tonight, it's not determinative, I'd like to see it. And then, this is kind of a specific question, but I'm curious, is there a budget being built out for the chief of staff?
We budgeted for the position, correct?
All the other things that go into the office budget?
I think we had too many tacos. We budgeted for the position, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't know what else. I guess we'd have to check.
I'm clear on the question, Director, from everyone else in the office.
He had other
There's like,
budgets
there's
under.
dues and fees, travel, I mean, there's a regular like list of things that are associated with that office.
Yes. Chief
Thank
of
you.
staff.
I can see you there. Okay, I'd like to see whatever next year's is for that office as well.
Yeah.
Then, there's in the budget document, there was a link to the FY '25 foundation funded FTE as of 5/3/24. And it's 15 FTE, and I'm wondering if I did go through volume 2, would these numbers
Change.
match?
I would need to check because the volume 2 data were pulled before 5/2. So there could be a possibility that someone used money to hire someone after we did the data pull initially. So I would need to follow up with you on that, Director.
Okay, and maybe just so I understand, so are the numbers that are in this book generally just pulled from the year before?
Yeah, sure. Gina, do you have that? You were interested in that? The volume 2 numbers.
The prior, I mean, it says actuals and actual columns.
Say it again, Julie. I'm not sure I can hear you very well either, so maybe say it a little louder.
So it loaded into the volume 2, which is the school by school.
Yeah.
There is a line item that basically says how things are being paid for. So for example, a school may in here have 1 FTE. And so my question was, is that the same as what's on this document? Or did this come from somewhere else?
For fiscal year 25, correct? Yes. So the volume 2 is a snapshot in time right after staffing, after HR completes its processes. However, once it's reopened, they're still shifting. So at the time that volume 2 was, it would have aligned. Although if we look at moving forward, it might misalign, especially now with the new changes in foundation. We are anticipating, my team is, that we're gonna see folks starting to use more of that funding. And we're gonna hear from some schools who maybe didn't apply it to staff for next year already, and now so that it will shift over to.
Great, that's super helpful and informative. Are the numbers that are in this book, are they based on the schools said this is what we're gonna do, or are they just pulled from the year before?
Based on what the schools have decided that they're going to do.
At the time when you guys were putting the
Yeah.
budget together? Okay, great. Should I just keep going?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have,
Jump in anytime. A question, and this is just generally for everybody. So we had the Community Budget Review Committee presentation the other night, and my question is, was there anything in the report that the district staff is going to, any of their recommendations going to utilize in this budget cycle?
I don't know that it's related to the general fund, but I could just speak personally. I think the team should look at some of the recommendations around deferred maintenance.
Around the what?
Deferred maintenance in reference, and that was a little confusing to me, that part of the conversation, because we started talking about recommendations for deferred maintenance, and then we immediately, I think it was Roger said, he was talking about punch lists on new schools. Dan brings up his concerns about deferred maintenance. It's major failed systems. It's Markham, it's Robert Ray, it's, a school run that doesn't have water for a whole day because of something that fails. So I have not had a chance to talk to Dan since that recommendation was made. I also think that there may be some things in their recommendations that we can thank them for, but also give them some additional information like we did with you guys about the informational library assistants, the value of the professional development the instructional coaches provide. There were a couple of other places where I don't think there were enough of us in budget review committee meetings that they get as much of a picture as the board did. So we may do a response in writing. I'd like to talk to the team next week about that.
This is a general comment.
Yeah.
For next year,
Yep.
so. Do with it, well, but last year we had, I mean, I look at the quality of the CBRC reports and they are much more detailed than they used to be with a lot of recommendations. And they're also doing it with, very little time between they get the budget and when they're actually expected to deliver it. And it seems like, out of respect for their work, us having either some follow-up of like, we took this into consideration, and this could even be something from the board, that just acknowledges, not just, hey, we cross off the list that we had the report from them, but, the board may be having in the summer or next fall doing a look at some of the things they recommended, which are some of the longer term things, and just responding to them, because I feel like we asked them to do a lot and then it's like, thank you, and then we're gonna go ahead with the budget.
Yeah, I think too, when I sat on the CBRC the first year here, and I know one of the elements was they give recommendations and it doesn't get used. And they wonder, well, why are we wasting our time, if nobody's gonna use any of the recommendations, and that, at least that was the sentiment when I was on there the first time. I guess that is a question. Are we looking at any other recommendations that we could potentially implement for this budget cycle?
Well, I didn't,
Because I mean, the stuff you're talking about is the bond stuff, and that stuff
Yeah.
we go deal with down the road, but as far
but it
as-
is in their recommendations, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that would be a nice recognition. They talked about, I think there was a little bit of misinformation, and again, I'm not blaming anybody, I don't know how it happened, because I wasn't in all those meetings, so I know what the board had in front of them, I'm not sure what the CBCR, whatever.
The
Budget
RBC.
CBRC had in front of them, but some things about, the 5% reserve, continued application of racial equity, social justice lenses. There was a couple of things in here about class size that I think they might need some just additional information about. We are really preserving class size. The amount of increase to class size is fairly minimal compared to the overall budget. So there's some very positive things. And if you want the board to have a response, Greg, Julia, and Eddie, we can take a stab at drafting something that you could consider if you want it to come from you or from us.
I don't have a strong sense, but I do feel like also if there's some things in there that because most of the people are gonna continue on, so if there are things that we feel like they should have more information about,
Yeah.
then I think it would be useful to share that with them.
Let us look at that over the next week, 2 weeks, because several of us are out most of next week. Let's look at putting together just a draft of ideas of how we might respond, and then you guys can talk about whether you want that to come from us or from both.
I think it would be good because they also have a really important role with the local option.
Yeah.
And which they're sort of our community verifiers, so I don't want to be like, this part of your job's important and this other part that took a lot of time,
Right.
which hasn't been considered. Jay, can I ask Jay
Of course
directly?
you can.
I really appreciate the sort of ongoing communication you've had with parents around the changes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, do we have a record of how many, I sort of informally checked with some parents who would have qualified, I think, for the invitations, and there were some people who missed them, and I do remember getting the invitation. Do we know how many parents participated in those sessions out of ones that apply to?
Yeah, we have, it's
almost 250. I mean, I have specific families, and I know who still have them going on, so we can continue to reach out to folks. So,
Would you like a summary of that?
Pardon?
Would you like a summary of that when they're done?
It would be helpful, and I guess knowing that, you know, this is the time of year, parents are super busy and something may come in, it's like, I can't do it that night. Is there, and so I don't know if there's like, you can attend, because I understand they're virtual.
yeah,
Like you could attend one of these 4 sessions with enough advance notice, usually people can arrange something, and so I would be curious to know like how many people we actually reached who it applied to.
Mhm.
Is one of the things, if we tell people and we give them multiple opportunities, we'll just have, I think, less people later on, like I had no idea.
Yeah.
And it seems like information here is really important to people understanding.
right. Yeah, no problem. I can summarize the data we have, and then we can continue to reach out and to ensure folks know we can attend any of the sessions that we have coming. There are several more that will be on there for the rest of the months.
I think you said people could also email you, is that?
Sure. I did, and it continues to be put out in public.
One other thing, I know I've asked this before, but I'm not sure if I know the answer. How much of this is budget driven and how much of it is, we think this is a better way to deliver services?
Most of the conversation and most of what we're doing is because it's a better way to deliver services to improve the program. In addition to that, we are talking about what we're doing because of budget, but it's a very small piece of what's happening. I think it's 2 FTE is specifically budget driven.
That's pretty small.
Yeah, the rest is because we're trying to improve the services and then we're shifting the program. That's what the whole neighborhood school part is about.
So I'll just speak to my own. I think because it's coming up at the same time as the budget, that the assumption is this is being done for budgetary reasons versus program delivery. And it seems like it would be useful for us to be able to, and I don't know if it's, we need, just for, in layperson's language, the programmatic improvements that are, we think it's going to deliver for students versus this is a budgetary exercise. Because I think that is the narrative out there. This is more of a budgetary exercise than changing, making programmatic improvements.
No, I completely agree and appreciate that. And that is the message of the presentation that we're delivering.
Oh, good.
And it is the, like, I think I've seen some of my responses to some of the people that are reaching out to all of us and tried to keep that as I'm responding to improve the program. And I appreciate the feedback because I don't think we can do that enough. So,
If you have a short narrative of what it is
Yeah.
versus what it isn't, what it is, it would be helpful to get so that we, when we're talking to people, we can share that information.
One sort of semi-budget related. In the CBRC report, I think it was in the CBRC, they also raised questions about the instructional coaches. I just want to personally vouch for instructional coaches. I think they're absolutely worthwhile. I think the fact that the principals highlight them is a very valuable resource. I think that's very important to highlight. To kind of give a personal example, I had an instructional coach in my 4th and 5th year of teaching, and it like literally shot me ahead 2, 3, 5 years ahead in my teaching skills. And for the rest of my 15 years after that, I was a way better teacher than I was before. So like, we may not see the direct results immediately at the same time, but when we talk about longitudinally over time, the impact of instructional coaches, I mean, it's just immeasurable. You can talk about like, oh yeah, for one teacher over there and one teacher over there affected, 12 more years of their career. That's huge, right? And I 100% agree with the value of instructional coaches. I think that that message needs to also be a little bit clearer. I think a lot of people don't get that because they see like, oh, one teacher, everyone sees their own world, they don't see the impact right away. But when you look at it system-wide, it's a huge impact. That being said, we are kind of, with budget cuts, we are kind of in a time of survival. One of the things that, when I was at PSU as the university supervisor, one of the things that we were working on and kind of looking into were models of co-teaching. And I was just kind of curious about like, is there a possibility, and again, this is just a throwing out there long shot question, but is there a possibility for some flexibility with instructional coaches in terms of like, now asking an instructional coach to take on a prep is just, we shouldn't do that because they already have too much on their plate. But if it means like we have a school, say with like 2 or 3 really huge class sizes, right? Is it a possibility to have, say like the instructional coach have a 0.2 of their FTE being devoted to co-teaching with other teachers? Is this something that, for example, a principal can decide on their own? Like,
Not
to address
currently.
any, not directly, they have to go through.
Director Wong, I appreciate the question and the thought. The budget reflects 3 big bets that we've made on how to improve student academic achievement, which the board is very clear that they want academic outcomes, especially for Black and brown children, to improve. We've unified a vision around teaching and learning. We call that our instructional framework. We have provided high quality curriculum materials in the hands of every educator. So that's our curriculum adoptions. And then we know we need to provide just in time, job embedded professional learning to teachers to help them with the curriculum and to shift educational practice. And that's what the instructional coaches are designed to do. And that's why they remain in the budget, because we know what happens when you put new materials in the hands of educators and don't provide their appropriate supports.
That's a good answer. Is there? I don't doubt that. I agree with you. That makes makes total sense. Is there, I guess, no question. I think I answered completely. I guess part of the reason I was throwing this out there is because, one of the time when we were in crunch time and survival mode, it just, sometimes we just have to be creative with what we have. So yeah, if you really think this is something that may detract from the overall mission, then.
The research on the power of professional development and instructional coaches is far stronger than the research on class size in terms of impact on student achievement.
The other thing I've seen throughout my career is everybody thinks the other teachers teach like I do, because you can't see in their classrooms. And so you may, because it was early on in your career, you can see the value. Somebody who's 15, 20 years in may say, well, I've been teaching really, really well for 15, 20 years. So it takes a while until later them saying, yeah, but I wasn't using these materials and now I understand how to use them and I understand how to raise the bar. I just have to say again, though, our class sizes are very favorable. I was on a superintendent meeting this morning at 7 a.m. and I can't remember the district and I wouldn't want to name it, but one of them is raising class size by 4 on the average, by 4. They're doing really well.
Yeah, when I was in North Clackamas, I saw class size of 40, 42.
Yeah. And the example the other night of the class sizes of 37 and 38, that was the first time I'd ever heard that. We tracked that pretty carefully, and I've heard 33 and 34. And they're concerned now because they can see 33 and 34 in a class, and you're assuming they'll all move to the next grade. And maybe they will.
Right.
And if they will, then Dr. Proctor and John and the team will look at the resources we have and see where we can provide some additional supports if needed.
The example the other night was also a middle school example, if I'm remembering. And we staff at a ratio far below 30 at middle school. And so that becomes a function of programmatic offerings in the school and scheduling.
Yeah, and
That makes sense.
and talking about the class size stuff, I think we had looked at a lot of the research during the bargaining piece. So I understand the class size argument in theory, but as we were doing the research around class sizes, we really seen there's other things like instructional coaching that will have a far more effect on student outcomes versus just the class size piece. So hopefully we can move away from that and get into more of the meat of other implementations that can work to be more effective than class sizes. But we're talking about you're talking about, you know, our board goals. And I know we talked about, you mentioned about the equity funding model. And just correct me if I'm wrong, is the equity funding model has changed for high school, but not K through 8?
We made adjustments at both.
Okay.
At K through 8, we reduced the amount of equity and invested in a position called an interventionist, which has shown some promise in some data that Jay's team collects around interventional students and multi-tier systems of support. At the high school level, as I shared when we were at McDaniel, we saw an opportunity to support students of color in schools that otherwise have high performance by shifting the allocation to follow students who qualify for free and reduced meal via direct certification. To the CBRC's question of like, what's the return on investment on that? Because they had that in there last year, I tried to respond to that. And one of the things that makes analyzing that very difficult is that every school does something different with their equity fund. And so how do you then determine the impact if I use it to shore up a halftime AP to a full-time AP, you use it to create another 5th grade teacher, you use it to hire a climate specialist, how do you then determine return on investment when everybody's doing something a little bit differently?
So
That's just
then
one
how
of the
do you,
challenges.
so then I guess the question is, and how do you know if we're switching those equity funds to follow those kids? How do you know that, how do we monitor to make sure that those kids are receiving the additional services that we're saying that they need?
So what I hope we will be able to do is continue to collect data from the interventionists. Jay's team, Chief Buno's team, does a nice job of that. They were able to demonstrate some of that. And I need time to think about it at the high school level and get with Dr. Franco and Ms. Howard to really think about how we can think about and examine with the senior directors of school, how high schools are choosing to use those funds and are they using them in possibly the most impactful ways.
Right. I mean, it's a great question, because if we are shifting, how is that going to be targeted, those resources on those students? What's an interventionist?
Think of it.
Jay,
you
like an answer.
sorry. Just up here, so-
He raised his hand, he was eager to answer that one, so.
Can you speak loudly?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. It's a teacher that's trained to deliver very specific reading and math instruction to students who are struggling. And a lot of the conversation we've had this year is, what do you do when students aren't at grade level or they're not responding to instruction? So these folks deliver very specific interventions during the intervention period to help students grow faster, help them get back on track. Using specific intervention tools, reading, math, specific.
That's in addition to core instruction, tier 1 core instruction.
So we reduced that for K-8s and K-5s in middle schools. We reduced the equity funding from 8 to 4, and we added interventionists?
Yes, we used the 4% and some discretionary funding that we scraped to add the interventionists to the schools. And add the students with the most academic need.
And how many do we?
I can give you that, I can get that information for you. I don't have it at my fingertip.
And then the other question is, if we're looking at our board goals, wouldn't the interventionist be more useful at the earlier grades, say K1, 2, right, in order to be in line with our board goals versus at the high school level?
So there aren't, I'm sorry, there's some confusion. There are not interventionists we did not fund interventionists at the high school level.
Oh,
We funded them K-8.
Okay.
Thinking about the board goals around, we've got 3rd grade reading, 5th grade math, 8th grade readiness. And so what we did is we looked at percentages of students that were scoring low on the MAP assessment and allocated the interventionists to the schools that had the highest numbers of students that fall in that category.
So just clarifying question, so the number of whether a school gets an interventionist or the number of is determined by
Student need.
district office, or is it determined by the principals and how they use their equity funds?
So two different things.
Okay,
There's interventionists that were allocated to schools based on student need. There's equity funding.
yes,
The district made the allocation for the interventionist.
that's the part.
Yes,
Clear. I
the
wanted to-
district allotted equity funds to schools, and then principals make decisions on how to use those funds, combined with if they're a Title I school or if they get some parent fund resources, et cetera.
Got it, thank you.
So talking about the equity funds that we moved to the high school, right? To ask the same question. If those funds could have been used to be more in line with our board goals as far as the reading, math and reading, could we have had extra interventionalists at those K-8 schools? And how would that look?
I want to make sure I'm following you.
So the dollars that we have allocated for high school for the equity funds, I know you said we added equity funds to all high schools.
We shifted.
Right,
And
we
so we
shifted.
had a certain amount and it just shifted between and among the schools.
Right, so one thing that we're talking about, and I'm trying to look 30 years down the road, if we are shifting those funds to, say, from schools like Lincoln, who has like a 68 or 38% math and reading levels already, if we're shifting some of those dollars back to K1, 2, would that be able to allow us to get more, say, interventionalists at those K-8 schools?
Yes, that would be possible. We could look at the equity funding formula and reduce the high school allocation and add more allocation at elementary level.
You'll always need the interventionists, but the stronger the teachers get on implementing the new curriculum, that's where you're going to start to see those subgroups rise.
And what we're trying to get implemented, as you heard Ms. Howard say, is core instruction. Students who are behind need both. They have to have the grade level material with scaffolds and access, and then they need the intervention to fill the gaps that they have from their learning and or not from previous years. And so the interventionists are helping us and helping students fill those gaps while we still expect the classroom teachers to be teaching at the grade level so the students have that exposure and access to the content that's appropriate for their grade.
Yeah, I like that idea, you know, of having no interventionalists. I just want them to see if we can shift more of that to those lower grades.
I understand.
And it's only because I don't know how the equity dollars were going to be used at the high school level and what kind of student performance will we get out of that at that age level.
Sure.
That's come up enough, whether we do that right away or whether that's something we do this fall. I think it's important for them to understand how those high schools use the equity dollars, what kind of an impact they're intended to have, even if it's different from building to building.
Yeah, I think it's important to take a look at it and also look at the overall needs within the high schools. Because we do have goals that point to high school success, college and career readiness, and we want to make sure that we're able to meet students' needs for those board goals as well.
Yeah, and I get that, but when I look at Lincoln and Grant, and I look at, and you compare it to our board goals, they're meeting those. So I'm just curious of what the equity dollars are going to do, and I'm just pointing out those schools because I'm just looking at them. What are those equity dollars going to do for those kids that they're already meeting our board goals based on graduation and, you know, college career readiness?
What I would say is what you typically find in high-performing schools, and I haven't done this deep a dive with our high-performing schools here, is inside the school, you still have the same gaps or similar gaps that you have in other places. So achievement of Black and brown students is not the same as achievement of white students, even in high-performing schools. And so it would be my hope that administrators are using those funds to support accelerating and bringing up the performance of those students, but we can certainly take a look at that.
I think it's a great question to ask before the school year starts. So there's an expectation of what we expect to see, or that they're not surprised at the year end when they, and I'm just looking at you because you answered the question. But that we are really clear that the expectation is that those resources apply to the students who are intending to.
With these interventionists, and I'm liking the idea because I just thought kind of hearing about it. If I heard about it, I just forgot. You know, is there a way we can actually funnel more dollars into those type of programs for K-8 schools, is there anywhere else we could funnel some dollars from? Whether we take it from, whatever pocket we take it from, to funnel that, because it seems like that could be something that is really going to be helpful, especially, when we talk about our board goals, kind of help move that needle even more.
I don't know if there are other pots of money left untapped. My understanding is that there aren't. So we would need to make some kind of trade-off, something that we're currently planning to do that we're not going to do, to then hire more interventonists at the
So-
K level.
Jay's trying to raise his hand.
Oh, go ahead, Jay. Go ahead, Jay. He might well come up to the table.
So I just wanna, so we do have the early literacy monies also coming into the system next year that has additional interventionists, high dosage tutoring monies, and some literacy coaches that will be moving forward, in partnership between our two offices for the K-2 grade bands moving into next year, that will be focused in essence in what you're talking about for our younger students. So that's another bucket of resources that will be moving towards addressing literacy for our students, in addition to our core resources, which of course is of most importance in supporting kids' literacy development.
Okay.
Also have to be very careful. It has to be very balanced. Focus too much on just percentage outcomes, it could overlook something else easily. But anyway, I don't know if you're done, sorry.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm done. Go ahead.
I have a question about summer programming. I know that, the state kind of screwed us over with their weird way of calculating who needs it most, by percentage, so number of, right? It's been a while since I kind of looked at it, so my memory's a little fuzzy, but I know that with the summer programming, as we know, a lot of kids fall behind during summers. How is that need being allocated? Because I know it's going to be smaller, right? So it's going to be the highest needs kids that get the priority. And how's that going to be done?
Yeah, so we're not going to be able to serve as many students as we have in the past 2 years during summer programming. We do have a method of identifying the students with the highest needs. And we're in the process of doing that now, as we've had to start planning for summer programming from a couple of months back at this point. And I will ask Christina Howard to share any more details that she may have available regarding summer programming.
Yeah, so we are still enrolling students. We have a hard cutoff date of May 16th. And so our target has been serving 2,000 students at 11 hub sites. But again, that depends on where we're going to be at the cutoff date. And so
How many students?
2,000.
2,000, yeah, was what we planned for. I can get updates too from the team. The different team works on that.
Thank you. That's 2,000 first through 11th grade, right? Or kindergarten through 11th.
Students in K-5 is our target.
That's your target, okay.
I'm assuming those summer scholars is still happening and
There's other programming still happening. I'm talking just specifically about Summer Acceleration Academy. And then we were on the wait list for the state. So this is what we're trying to work through. It's within our own internal funding.
How much, I wasn't sure, how much are we short from what we spent last year, what we're budgeting for this year?
Last year, we budgeted for about 4 million. Yeah, but, and this year's two
This
and a
year's
half.
2.5 million.
So it's 4 million last year, and this year is 2.5. So it's about 1.5 million.
again, asking about this topic because
Okay,
I was gonna move on to a different topic.
Yeah.
That's okay.
are
Maybe
you
one-
done?
Actually,
Okay.
before, one of the things is I didn't realize that the 8 to 4, so I was a little bit surprised we were going from 8 to 4, but I didn't realize there was that other piece. Does all of our material, when we talk about the change in the equity formula, talk about that intervention? I think tonight's the first time I heard that.
So I don't have a budget book with me, but I believe it's in the school staffing right up on the budget book.
Yeah.
And does it make that, this is a substitute, or does it talk about this is something different? I'm just wondering how I could have totally missed it.
I can't recall the
I'm
exact.
glad to hear about it, but I was just,
But it is in there, so I can go back and take a look and we can highlight that
okay.
for you.
It's just like when we talk about it, instead of like, hey, we're cutting equity from 8 to 4, it's like we're changing what it looks like and making it more effective. I have a question, and this is, if we don't have the number tonight, just at some point before approval, what we predict the overage is gonna be for teachers on the class size. And then a secondary question is, do we have any circumstances in which we're convening the class, I forget what we're,
Class size committee, I believe that goes into effect next year.
I can't hear you.
It goes into effect for next school year.
Not this, isn't that this year?
No, but
No, it's
25,
next school year.
26.
So once we go into school session and once we get to like our 10-day, 20-day count and we go to balancing, then we'll identify where there's overages in class size and convene the committee so that we can resolve those overages.
I think it'd be hard for me to forget the details. However,
dumb stuff.
Tied to sleep.
it was like 5 o'clock in the morning that I
You
was
should
trying
have
to absorb.
said no. You should have said no.
Trying to remember, the trigger though was at a certain level. We have class sizes though, that even if we wait till the October count, we have some now that we,
Yes, is your question, why aren't we convening?
no, it's more like we know we'll have some probably. Without waiting till October, have we, is there an agreement about how we're going to proceed?
I honestly am not that involved in the, how we are rolling that out. I know that there are groups talking about what that process looks like, because you go from the contract language to actual implementation, and there's a gap between those two things. So I can get you more information on that, but it is effective because it's effective for the next school year. We have not been doing it yet this school.
It would be.
And we did budget for that. Right, we did budget for that, the potential overages.
Oh, yeah, so I'm just curious about what that number is usually.
About the number,
The overage number, I'm going back to my first question.
yes.
Yeah, we're in the process of planning for that process. We do have entry points for conversations with PAT to discuss what that would look like, and IPC, which is our Instructional Practices Committee, meets monthly. We do have another one coming up, and then I'm sure Dr. Franco could speak to how the schools teams is looking at bringing together a committee. So that we can plan it.
Sorry. I did do,
You're hiding back there.
we did start off with an initial PAT building administrator calibration on the new contract. And so we started the process of what that class size committee process could look like. There's gonna be a specific training for building administrators, so we can get it. We'll do that.
It would be, just because it was a very central issue in much of the, especially at the end of the bargaining, to have a sense of how, like, is this gonna be like half of our schools or a handful of our schools?
Where does that apply? Yeah,
Yeah,
we'll get you, in fact, the team is looking to see if we have the overages estimate right now, but if we don't have it tonight, we'll get it for you. And then we'll also be able to identify how many schools this is impacting. That language.
and if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember it was like 20 classes or something that this would trigger. that.
Class size estimates.
Yeah.
That Dr. Adams' team put out.
Yeah, I think it was something like 20 classrooms or
It may have
22
been at the time, but let
classrooms.
us look again.
Yeah,
We can take
but I
another
thought it
look.
was like 20 schools, and I remember it was like, no, it's like 20 classrooms that we had this whole
Sure.
conversation about.
And with the overages data, what we can provide Director members is what we paid last year. And pretty soon we'll be able to give you what we're paying this year now that the new contract's in place, because we did have to go back and redo the fall overages for the differences. And then the spring overages are being calculated at the teacher's current rate of pay.
I do just have to mention that John and Renard I participated in a meeting with, it was just 10 schools from the SEGC quarter. You're familiar with that. And it was really interesting, the awareness level, when they each had a couple of minutes to share what their current situation was, that the empathy and the perspective changed, not dramatically, from just advocating for my school to understanding what's going on across the region. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to do that eventually with 80 principals. So when these school committees are working, they don't just think about the view they can see. They actually think about it across the whole district. Because I think the principals were really amazing sense makers once they got to hear from each other.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, it was very informative. It took them a little longer. It took me 30 minutes and I had to pop to another meeting, but I'm glad I did it too. And I will say that when you get into those, I've said this over and over again, we have a very, very robust, deep curriculum here. That's what's creating, in some cases, a lot of these overages. We're trying to offer a full English strand with a full dual immersion, what do we call it? Dual language immersion, and your numbers don't come in even. So you get 10 kids over here and 32 in a class where the teacher is teaching in 2 languages, and the kids have a lot of cultural needs as well. But it's interesting to learn about it, and I'm really glad we do it. Yeah.
Good to hear.
Yeah. And I don't know how old that little girl was that spoke to us in Mandarin and then in English.
Oh, man, that was awesome.
Isn't that impressive?
Yeah.
You didn't say it.
Yeah, I was hoping you would translate or something,
Yeah,
but.
it was gonna be like an 8-hour meeting.
I think I heard Herman or Gary, one of them said, she can have whatever she wants.
Yeah, that's Herman. Yeah, that's Herman.
Herman, does he have any questions?
I don't know. You got any questions, Herman?
The cuteness factor. always.
No, I do not at this time. And yes, little kids are my kryptonite. Do not allow them to come to the dais and ask for anything. They will get it.
We're gonna go back to the equity funding just a little bit. How are we determining, I guess, the equity funding? Like, what factors are we determining the equity dollars? Is it?
We look at the percentage of students that are historically underserved by race. We also look at students who qualify for free and reduced meals, students receiving special education, or English language supports.
So just overall underserved?
Yes.
Okay.
We call it combined underserved because we're looking at things outside of race, in addition to race.
Right. Okay. Right, so, and it's just trying to get that clarity. So for instance, when I look at Lincoln, and I'm just picking on Lincoln because that's
The high schools, it's just free and reduced meals.
Okay, so K-8 is
All
all
those things in
high school is just free and reduced meals.
And the majority, I think
Is there a
it's like-
reason why you
I'm sorry.
pick, I'm sorry, is there a reason why you pick free and reduced meals versus any of the other?
The majority of the free and
Underserved.
reduced meal students are students of color.
Okay.
That's why we picked that.
Okay.
So my questions.
Good. You said you got no more?
Is that the same thing as I ask all my questions?
Oh, it didn't click to my mind, and I thought you had some more. Okay.
There's a famous legislative line where somebody said, was that 500,000 or 500,000?
Oh, I've got, it disconnected, and my mind just automatically said you're gonna have some more questions. So
What was the response to that question?
You good?
Yeah.
All right. You guys got any questions?
We have no questions.
All right. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Director Green, for popping in.
Same, can I ask for?
Thank
Yeah.
thank y'all.